The room was small, a cramped one-room apartment. It had been her home for as long as she could remember, and it had never caused her any trouble. She was used to the creaking floors and flickering lights, and though the building was old, she had grown fond of it. It was quiet, which was something she cherished. But one evening, as she sat on her worn-out sofa, reading a book by the dim light of a single flickering bulb, she felt an eerie chill crawl down her spine. She looked around the room, wondering if she had forgotten to close a window, but they were all tightly shut. Her heart raced as the air seemed to grow heavy, and then without warning, a deafening crash echoed through the room. She jumped from her seat, her heart pounding in her chest, and scanned her surroundings. It was impossible to ignore the shattered remains of her bathroom mirror that now lay strewn across the floor. Confusion and terror gripped her as she approached the damaged mirror. It hadn't just fallen, it had exploded into shards as if something had burst out from within. She tried to dismiss it as a freak accident, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling, and dialed her landlord's number. As the call connected, the line crackled with interference and she could barely hear his voice on the other end. "Hello, can you hear me?" she said, her voice shaking. "What's the issue, dear? I can't hear you clearly. Something wrong with your line?" her landlord replied. The windows in the room, without warning, imploded with a shower of glass. She screamed, diving behind her sofa for cover, her phone clattering to the floor. Shards of glass rained down upon her, slicing into her skin. The room had become a maelstrom of chaos, with debris flying through the air as if it were being propelled by an invisible force. As she huddled on the floor, her sanctuary descended into chaos. The walls seemed to tremble as if the very foundation of the building had turned against her. The floor beneath her feet gave way and she fell into the dark, dusty crawl space below. Panicking, she crawled through the cramped space, unable to comprehend what was happening. The sounds of destruction above grew more deafening, and she could barely breathe through the dust that filled the air. In the darkness, she came across an old, forgotten journal, covered in cobwebs. Desperation forced her to read its pages. The journal detailed the stories of countless others who had lived in this one-room apartment. It spoke of whispers in the night, flickering shadows that danced in corners, and the relentless sense of being watched. All had experienced the same unexplainable phenomena before vanishing without a trace. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized her fate was sealed. The room was hungry. It had swallowed them all, and now it hungered for her. She continued to crawl, praying that she might escape the room's malevolent grasp. But it was too late. The world outside ceased to exist as she knew it. The room, once her sanctuary, had become her tomb. As the last of the walls crumbled around her, she realized that she had become another haunting tale in the journal, a victim of a malevolent force that had chosen to manifest within the very walls of her one-room apartment. The room's malevolence consumed her, and her existence faded into the room's ever-growing abyss. She was gone, just another tragic entry in the journal's forgotten pages, as the room continued its relentless quest to claim the souls of all who dared to enter its confines. For days, weeks, or perhaps even longer, she existed in a state of disorientation. She was no longer confined to her small apartment, but she was trapped within a nightmarish realm that defied all sense and logic. Time was elusive, as was the concept of space. The boundaries of the room stretched into an infinite abyss, and she was just a speck within its ever-expanding darkness. Memories of her life outside the room began to blur and fade, as if they were being slowly erased by some malevolent force. She would sometimes catch fleeting glimpses of her old existence, a birthday party, a family gathering, the faces of friends. But these memories would slip away like smoke before she could grasp them. Occasionally, she encountered phantoms, the apparitions of those who had met their fates before her. They whispered to her in haunting voices, telling stories of despair, torment, and an eternity of suffering within the room's depths. Their hollow eyes were mirrors to her own dread, and their fading forms served as constant reminders of her impending doom. She fought to find a way out, searching for any chink in the room's twisted reality. But each time she approached what seemed like an exit, it would elude her grasp, shifting away like an insubstantial dream. The room was an enigma, a cruel puzzle that mocked her feeble attempts to unravel its mysteries. As time passed, or perhaps stood still, her sense of self began to crumble. She questioned whether she was real or just another specter trapped in this nightmarish realm. Her thoughts became fragmented, and she could no longer distinguish between reality and illusion. The boundaries of her own identity blurred, leaving her with a growing sense of despair and madness. She whispered fragments of half-remembered prayers into the void, hoping for salvation, for an end to her torment. But the room remained indifferent, an inscrutable malevolence that fed on her fear and confusion. She was alone in this desolation, with no hope of rescue or redemption. And then one day, or was it night, the room seemed to relent. It shrank, folding in on itself like a dying star. The walls and floor closed in around her, and as the room compressed, she felt herself being crushed with it. The pressure was unbearable, and she screamed in agony as the room collapsed, folding into a singularity of darkness. In that moment of intense suffering, she glimpsed a sliver of clarity. She understood that the room had consumed not just her body, but her very essence. She was part of its malevolent consciousness now, eternally trapped within its twisted reality. The room had taken another soul, and it would continue to claim more, relentlessly unraveling the lives of those unfortunate enough to cross its threshold. In the void of its existence, it waited patiently for the next victim to unwittingly step inside, ignorant of the horrors that lay beyond the door. Her consciousness merged with the room's ever-expanding malevolence, and she became an eternal whisper in the shadows, a warning to all who might stumble upon that fateful one-room apartment, a place where time and space had no meaning, and where the unraveling of reality and the human spirit intertwined in a never-ending dance of despair and desolation.